Hello ladies and gentlemen and everyone beyond, I am BabyNoobCakes and this is Twitch Prime Free Game Reviews. And in this episode, we're going to be taking a look at one of the March 2020 free games, Bomber Crew. In this game, we'll take to the skies across the English Channel to bring victory to the Allies during World War II. But will this game be a full payload or just a dud? Let's attempt to answer the question. As one of the free games of the month, was it worth it? Mechanics. Bomber Crew is a real-time strategy game where you take control of up to 7 crew members who pilot a bombing plane during World War II. On your crew, you'll have a pilot to fly the plane, an engineer to fix broken systems and manage the fuel, a navigator to give you directions, a radar tech to watch out for enemies, 2 gunners to shoot enemy planes out of the sky, and a bomber who does, what else? Drop bombs. And you, as the player, effectively control all of them at once. This may sound a bit overwhelming, and there is a decent learning curve as you start your campaign of missions, but it isn't as difficult as I'm making it sound. The functions that you, the player, are responsible for are setting your altitude, acknowledging flight paths, targeting enemies, refilling ammo, sending your troops to the recovery bed, and targeting bomb drops. There are a few other things that you'll need to do as well, but this is your main bread and butter actions. To accomplish these actions, there are a few keyboard shortcuts, but clicking on your troops and then clicking where you want them works just as well if you prefer. Most of your crew don't need to be moved all that often anyway. The biggest interaction you'll have though is targeting. You can bring up a reticle that serves multiple purposes. You aim at enemies, and your gunners will continually shoot at them until they knock them out of the sky. You can also use this targeting to choose new headings for your plane and to target bombing runs. I think it's pretty safe to say that the most important role on your plane is, astoundingly, the bomber. Their secondary function is as a gunner and will start most missions in that section of the plane. Once you near your target though, you'll need to manually swap them to the bombing station. From here, you'll open the bomb bay doors, select how much of your payload you're dropping, and watch the targeting system to land your shot successfully. The bomber can also take reconnaissance photos through their targeting camera for bonus points on missions. Once back at base, your crew and plane can be upgraded in between missions, and any missing crew members can be replaced at the recruitment tent. This is accomplished with the 2 different rewards you get from successfully completing missions. The first is cash that you use to buy upgraded plane parts and new equipment and clothes for your crew. The second reward didn't seem to have been given a name inside the game. Maybe I just missed it, but I'm gonna call it renown. You don't spend it like money, but the more missions and optional objectives you complete, the higher your renown goes. When you first start the game, you'll see a lot of the customization and upgrade options aren't available yet, but they'll have a renown score next to them. Once you reach that threshold, you unlock the ability to purchase those items, making your crew and aircraft stronger for the dangerous missions ahead. Art style. Overall, this game relies on a pretty cartoony style of graphics and uses chibi proportions for its characters. The game uses pretty plain textures for the most part, and a lot of solid colors. It's also pretty sparse on effects and particles, but what is there meshes well with the rest of the style. Your plane and crew are all customizable with how they look. You can add decals to your plane, and you can even create your own images with a very rudimentary design function similar to an MS Paint. And you even can import your own pre-existing images. It takes a bit of doing. There's no import feature, and you actually need to jump into the program files and replace the existing images with your own, but it is doable. Each soldier you hire is pre-generated by the game and each have a distinct face. The clothing and upgrades you buy for your crew actually make a pretty big difference in how they look. Since they're chibi-sized, all of these changes actually show in their features. One more artistic touch to mention is that your plane has voxel geometry and will break apart under enemy fire and come back to base a little worse for wear. Sound. Bomber Crew has some pretty exciting music. Whenever you finish or start a mission, you'll be treated to some patriotic marches, and whenever combat starts up, you'll feel the tension rise with the music. but during most of the time you're playing, you'll be listening to only the sound effects of guns, engines, and the bombs dropping. Your crew members will also chime in with suggestions and requests, but they speak in sort of a mumble voice, similar to what you'd hear in an Animal Crossing game. Which, hey, actually matches the overall cartoony aesthetic of the game. Replayability. A full playthrough of Bomber Crew will last you about 17 to 19 hours, and as I've already covered, there are quite a few choices you make throughout the game about what gear you outfit your pilots with, what upgrades you make for your plane, and when choosing missions, you usually have 3 different choices to pick from, each having a different objective to complete. All of these different options and choices do have an impact on how the game plays, so if you were to replay and make different decisions, you could have a slightly different experience, and no one's playthroughs are going to be exactly the same. That being said, these choices you make aren't radically unique, and for the most part, you will still be doing the same kind of tasks, namely, bombing enemies, shooting down enemy fighters, and micromanaging your squad. Narrative. There isn't much of a storyline to this game. There's actually very little dialogue or description about what is happening elsewhere during your time playing. It pretty heavily relies on the fact that you know part of the history of World War II. But it's easy enough to follow. You fly missions further and further inland into Europe from Great Britain and push back the Axis powers throughout the whole of the campaign. I suppose you could come up with a bit of your own storyline for this, as your characters can die, and you can replace them with new ones that have new names, new faces, and new stats. This does take a bit of creativity though, and isn't in any way a classical narrative storyline. My opinion. I was thoroughly impressed by this game. Based on my initial impression from just looking at the art and the way this game presented itself, I was expecting a pretty terrible and boring experience at best. This was mostly due to the cartoony and chibi artwork, which made me think of the way some mobile games advertise themselves. But this game actually held my interest pretty well. And full disclosure, I haven't finished the full game yet, and I don't know if I plan to specifically, but I might. Running the entire crew of a bombing plane was quite hectic. And I definitely failed a few missions at first because you are expected to manage a lot at once pretty early on in the game. And if you aren't on your toes, you'll be shot out of the air. Or maybe you'll just run out of fuel. You are juggling a lot at once, but it didn't really take me that long to figure out the flow of it. The game starts you with only a few options for each crew member, and once you internalize the flow and how to manage everything, it feels really good. And even as I advanced and leveled up some of my crew, I was able to put all of their new skills into practice pretty quickly. One thing I did find very strange, though, is that it doesn't cost money to recruit new troops. I know during World War II there was a draft, but it just feels strange that the only resource you lose, if a troop dies, is the troop themselves and their level progression. Because as long as you have an open spot on your team, there's always a new recruit to take their place in the tent. When you do choose new recruits, they each have their own stats, and some are objectively better than others, which makes it feel like the developers were just trying to trick people for not reading stat blocks. It seems weird and unbalanced to me. Another thing that bugged me a little bit about this game was that the camera was pretty jittery. Make sure you go to your settings and decrease the sensitivity for the targeting camera because it will make you sick at the default setting. Another issue I had was that the camera would zoom in and out with the scroll wheel. This allows you to see inside your plane, but also outside your plane to watch for enemies. But the problem is that some of the steps that the zoom takes are a bit too much. I would have liked the zoom to glide in and out a little bit more, but I think the most glaring issue for this game, and you'll hear more about it once we get to the worth it section, is that after I was playing it for a little while, it really started to remind me of FTL, Faster Than Light, which is a good thing, because that's an awesome game. And if you are a fan of managing a whole team of characters where all your decisions could mean the difference between life and death, both of these games delivered that to you. The problem here is that all I could think of was playing FTL while I was playing this game. Bomber Crew is by no means awful, but it just reminds me that there's better games out there, and I'd rather be playing those that are much more interesting, have more varied gameplay, and hold my attention better. Was it worth it? This was a really hard call to make. Did I have fun with it? Yeah, I did. Did I have a lot of fun with it? Not really. Which is why I'm torn about this judgment. I think that there are some people out there who will like this game a lot, but not very many. And I think even more people out there will never give this one a chance due to the cartoony graphics, even though it's a pretty accessible and relatively faithful wargame simulator. The biggest letdown with Bomber Crew is that there are better versions of this game out there. I mentioned FTL before, and I just feel like I'd rather be playing that than Bomber Crew. I don't know many other games in this genre, so I'll leave it at that, but for fans of this genre, I'm sure that unless they were totally out of anything else to play, they wouldn't pick this one up as their first choice. I know a lot of you out there probably looked at this game and said, nope. And that's because being both cartoony and lighthearted, but clashing that with the themes of the horrors of war, seems like an odd choice of a combination to create a game around. Additionally, it's also a pretty cheap game, which is pretty standard for the Twitch Prime free games, but you can pick this up for around $3 on sale and only $15 if you pay full price. This makes it really hard to say that this was a good pick for one of the free games of the month. So, I think I have to say that Bomber Crew was not worth its spot as one of our free Twitch Prime games of the month. But maybe that's for you to decide. Whether you agree or disagree with my judgment, get at me in the comments. Let me know what you think, and let's discuss if this month's games were worth it or not. Also, don't forget to go onto the Twitch app and download your free games every month. Because hey, they're free, and sometimes you'll end up with a few gems. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you later.